I found something in my basement that wasn't supposed to be there. It had been watching my family for months. These are the top 10 terrifying Reddit stories that will keep you up tonight. And trust me, number 1 will keep you up tonight. Number 10, the night shift watcher. I work security at a downtown office building, the graveyard shift from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. It's usually quiet, just me and the occasional cleaning crew. I didn't think much of it when I started noticing the same woman in the parking garage every night around 2 a.m. She'd just stand there by the pillar, wearing a dark coat, looking up at the building. I figured she was waiting for someone or maybe having a smoke break from one of the 24-hour businesses nearby. But after 2 weeks, I realized she never moved from that exact spot. Same position, same coat, same empty stare. I decided to check the security cameras from previous nights. That's when I saw it. She'd been there every single night for 3 months. Before I even started working there, standing in the exact same spot, staring up at the same floor. The camera timestamp showed she would appear at exactly 2:17 a.m. and disappear at 4:33 a.m. I went down to the garage the next night to confront her. When I got to the pillar, there was nothing there but a small pile of dead flowers and a note that said, "Tell them I'm still waiting." I quit the next morning. The security company said they'd had trouble keeping that position filled for over a year. Number 9, the Dollhouse. I bought my first house last spring, a 1950s colonial that needed some work but had good bones. The previous owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chen, had passed away and her family just wanted it sold quickly. Everything seemed normal until I found the dollhouse in the basement. It was an exact replica of my house, down to the wallpaper and furniture placement. Even the tiny family inside looked like me and my girlfriend, Sarah. I thought it was charming, maybe something Mrs. Chen made as a hobby. But then I noticed the dolls would move. At first, I convinced myself I was imagining it. The male doll that looked like me would be in the living room when I left for work, but in the kitchen when I got home. Sarah thought I was being paranoid until she saw it too. The female doll was sitting at the tiny kitchen table when we went to bed. The next morning, it was standing at the bedroom window. We decided to get rid of the dollhouse, but every time we tried to throw it away, it would reappear in the basement. The dolls started showing us things that were going to happen. The day Sarah got food poisoning, I found her doll lying on the bathroom floor that morning. The night our car got broken into, both dolls were positioned, looking out the front window. We moved out last month. The new owners called me yesterday. They found a dollhouse in the basement. The family inside looks exactly like them. Number 8, the hiking trail. I love hiking alone. It's my way to decompress from the stress of law school. There's a trail about an hour from campus that I'd been going to every weekend for months. It's a moderate loop, takes about 3 hours, and I rarely see other people. Last October, I noticed someone was always exactly the same distance behind me on the trail. I'd catch glimpses through the trees, a figure in dark clothing, keeping pace but never getting closer or falling further behind. I thought maybe it was just another regular hiker with a similar schedule. But when I stopped for water breaks, they'd stop too. When I sped up, they'd speed up. I decided to test it by taking a detour off the main trail. They followed. I hid behind a large boulder and waited to see who it was. 20 minutes passed, nothing. I emerged from my hiding spot and continued hiking. Within 10 minutes, they were behind me again, maintaining that exact same distance. I started bringing friends with me, but the figure never appeared when others were around. Only when I hiked alone. Last weekend, I decided to hike the trail backwards, starting from the end point. If someone was following me, I'd see them coming. About halfway through, I met myself on the trail. Same dark clothing, same backpack, same face. It nodded at me and continued walking. I ran back to my car and drove home. I haven't been hiking since. Number 7, the new apartment. I moved into a studio apartment in Brooklyn last year after college. The rent was surprisingly affordable for the neighborhood, which should have been my first red flag. The landlord, Mr. Rodriguez, seemed nervous when he showed me around and kept mentioning that the previous tenant had moved out suddenly. I didn't think much of it until the noises started. Every night at 3:17 a.m. I'd hear footsteps in the apartment above me. Slow, deliberate pacing back and forth. It would last exactly 17 minutes, then stop. I assumed it was just a neighbor with insomnia until I realized the building was only 3 stories tall, and I was on the 3rd floor. There was nothing above my apartment but the roof. I mentioned it to Mr. Rodriguez, who got very pale and mumbled something about old buildings settling. The footsteps got louder over the next few weeks. I could hear them during the day too, always the same pattern. 17 steps forward, pause, 17 steps back. I decided to check the roof access. The door was locked, but through a small window, I could see footprints in the dust. They led from the door to the exact spot above my bedroom and back. Over and over, the same path worn into the rooftop. That night, I set up a camera pointing at my ceiling. The next morning, I watched the footage. At 3:17 a.m., the ceiling light fixture began swaying gently, as if someone was walking above it. But the camera also picked up something else. The sound wasn't coming from above. It was coming from inside my walls. I moved out the next week. Mr. Rodriguez didn't ask for notice. Number 6, the carpool. My daughter Emma is 7 years old and in 2nd grade. Both my wife and I work, so Emma takes the school bus most days, but sometimes I'll pick her up when I leave work early. 3 weeks ago, Emma told me about her new friend on the bus, a girl named Lucy who sits with her every day. Emma described Lucy as having long dark hair and a blue backpack, and said Lucy knows all the same songs she likes. I was happy Emma was making friends, but when I mentioned Lucy to Emma's teacher during parent conferences, she looked confused. There was no Lucy in Emma's class, or in the 2nd grade at all. I asked Emma to point out Lucy the next day when I picked her up. Emma looked around the parking lot and pointed to an empty spot near the back of the bus. "She's right there, Daddy. Lucy's waving at you." I couldn't see anyone. That evening, I called the school transportation office to get the bus roster. They confirmed what the teacher said. No Lucy on Emma's bus route. But then the coordinator mentioned something strange. "You know, you're the 2nd parent to call about this Lucy girl this month." The other parent's child, a boy named Marcus, also claimed to sit with Lucy every day. Marcus was in 4th grade and rode a completely different bus. I decided to follow Emma's bus the next morning. At every stop, I watched kids get on and off. No girl matching Lucy's description. But Emma waved at an empty seat and chatted animatedly with no one for the entire ride. That night, I asked Emma what Lucy talks about. Emma's response made my blood run cold. Lucy says she used to take the bus to school too, but she doesn't need to anymore. She just likes riding with us because she misses it. I drive Emma to school now. Number 5. The photography job. I'm a freelance photographer, mostly weddings and events, but I take odd jobs to pay the bills. Last month, I got a call from a man who wanted me to photograph his grandmother's 90th birthday party at their family home. The pay was good, and he seemed pleasant enough on the phone. The address he gave me was in an older suburb about 40 minutes away. When I arrived, the house looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1960s, but it was well maintained. The man who hired me, David, greeted me at the door and led me to a dining room where about 15 people were gathered around an elderly woman in a wheelchair. The family was friendly, and the grandmother was sharp and funny despite her age. I spent 2 hours photographing the party, getting candid shots of conversations and the cake ceremony. Everyone seemed to enjoy having me there. David paid me in cash and asked me to email the photos within a week. When I got home and started editing the images, I noticed something odd. In every single photo, there were more people than I remembered being there. Shadowy figures standing behind the family members, sitting in empty chairs, crowding around the birthday cake. But here's the strangest part. The extra people in the photos all looked like older versions of the family members I had photographed, like I was seeing them decades in the future. I called David to ask about it, but the number was disconnected. I drove back to the house to deliver the photos in person. The house was abandoned. Windows boarded up, yard overgrown, clearly empty for years. A neighbor told me the family who lived there had all died in a carbon monoxide leak in 1987. The grandmother's 90th birthday would have been last month. Number 4. The babysitting gig. I'm a college student and I babysit for extra money. The Hendersons were a new family for me, referred by another family I'd worked for. They had 2 kids, Jake, age 8, and Sophie, age 5. Both parents worked late and needed someone to watch the kids until about 10 p.m. twice a week. The kids were well behaved, and the job seemed easy. Mrs. Henderson gave me a tour of the house and mentioned that the kids sometimes talked about their friend who lived in the basement. She laughed it off as typical childhood imagination and told me to just redirect them if they wanted to go downstairs. The basement door stayed locked anyway. Everything went fine for the first few weeks. Then Jake started asking if he could show me their friend. Sophie would nod eagerly and say their friend was lonely and wanted to meet me. I explained that we needed to stay upstairs, but the kids became increasingly insistent. One evening, while I was helping Sophie with homework, Jake disappeared. I found him standing at the basement door, having a conversation with someone. "He says he knows you," Jake told me. "He says you used to babysit him too." I pulled Jake away from the door and called Mrs. Henderson. She came home early and seemed shaken when I told her what happened. The next morning, she called to tell me they wouldn't need my services anymore. A week later, I ran into the family who had referred me to the Hendersons. They looked confused when I thanked them for the referral. They'd never heard of any family called Henderson. I drove past the house the next day. The for sale sign in the yard looked like it had been there for months. Number 3. The roommate. I needed a roommate to help with rent, so I posted on Craigslist and met with several people. Mark seemed perfect. Quiet, clean, worked nights so we'd rarely see each other. He paid first month's rent and security deposit in cash and moved in the next week. For the first month, it was like living alone. I'd see signs that Mark was there, dishes in the sink, his bedroom light on, but our schedules never overlapped. Then I started noticing things were slightly off. My food would be rearranged in the fridge, books on my shelf would be in different order, my laptop would be warm in the morning, even though I'd shut it down the night before. I figured Mark was just using my stuff occasionally and didn't want to make a big deal about it. But then my friends started commenting that I looked tired. I was sleeping fine, or so I thought. I decided to set up a small security camera in the living room to see what Mark was doing while I slept. The footage from the first night was normal. Mark came home around midnight, heated up some food, watched TV quietly, then went to his room around 2 a.m. But the second night, the camera caught something that made me physically sick. Around 1 a.m., my bedroom door opened, and I walked out, but I was still sleeping. I watched myself move around the apartment, going through my own belongings, using my laptop, eating my food. This other version of me did this for 3 hours before going back to my room. I confronted Mark the next day, but he looked genuinely confused. "I've never seen you at night," he said. "You're always in your room sleeping when I get home." I realized Mark wasn't my roommate. I was Mark. I was sleepwalking and living a completely different life that I couldn't remember. I got medical help and the sleepwalking stopped, but sometimes I still find things moved around in the morning. Number 2, the online date. I matched with Sarah on a dating app last fall. She seemed perfect, funny, smart, shared my love of hiking and horror movies. We texted for 2 weeks before meeting for coffee at a cafe near downtown. The date went really well. Sarah was even more charming in person, and we had an immediate connection. We made plans to see each other again the following weekend. Over the next month, we went on 6 dates. Sarah was everything I'd been looking for in a partner. There was just one small thing that bothered me. She never wanted to take photos together. Whenever I tried to take a selfie or asked someone to take our picture, she'd decline or change the subject. I figured she was just private about social media. After 2 months of dating, I was starting to fall for Sarah. I wanted to introduce her to my friends and family, but every time I suggested meeting my friends or going to a group event, she had an excuse. I started to wonder if she was seeing someone else. One evening, I decided to do a reverse image search on her dating profile photos. I know it sounds paranoid, but something felt off. The search results made my heart stop. Sarah's photos belonged to a woman named Jennifer Martinez, who had been missing for 3 years. According to the news articles, Jennifer had disappeared after meeting someone from a dating app. She was last seen leaving a cafe near downtown, the same cafe where I'd met Sarah. I called the police, but when I tried to contact Sarah to ask her about it, her number was disconnected. Her dating profile had been deleted. I gave the police all the information I had about our dates, the restaurants we'd been to, the places we'd walked, everything I could remember. But here's the part that still keeps me awake at night. The detective told me they'd checked the security cameras from all the locations I mentioned. Every single camera showed me eating alone, walking alone, talking to myself. There was never anyone with me. Number 1, the family in the basement. I bought my house 3 years ago in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was built in the 1970s and needed some updating, but the price was right for a first-time homeowner. The basement was partially finished. One side had been converted into a rec room with paneling and carpet, while the other side remained unfinished storage space. I used the finished side as a home office and rarely went into the storage area. About 6 months after moving in, I started hearing sounds from the basement at night. Soft voices, like people having quiet conversations. I figured it was the neighbors' voices carrying through the walls, or maybe sounds from the street filtering through the basement windows. But the windows were small and high up, and when I checked, they were all sealed shut. The sounds continued for weeks, always at night, always the same soft murmur of conversation. I started to make out individual voices, what sounded like a man, a woman, and sometimes children. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the tone was conversational, domestic, like a family talking during dinner. I decided to investigate one night when the voices were particularly clear. I crept down to the basement with a flashlight and slowly made my way toward the unfinished storage area where the sounds seemed to be coming from. As I got closer, I could hear them more clearly. A man's voice saying something about work, a woman responding about groceries, a child asking for help with homework. Normal family conversation, except it was coming from behind a wall in my basement. I pressed my ear to the drywall and could hear them as clearly as if I were in the same room. That's when I noticed something I'd never seen before, a section of the basement wall that didn't quite match the rest. The paneling was slightly different, like it had been replaced or repaired. I decided to investigate during the day when the voices weren't there. Using a utility knife, I carefully cut through the paneling. Behind it was insulation, and behind that, another wall. But this wall had a door. A small door, maybe 4 feet tall, that had been completely sealed behind the paneling. My heart was pounding as I cleared away enough material to open the door. It creaked as I pulled it open, and my flashlight illuminated a small room behind my basement wall. The room was furnished like a 1970s living space. There was a couch, a coffee table, children's toys scattered on the floor, family photos on the walls, and there was evidence that people had been living there recently. Fresh food wrappers, a pillow that was still warm, children's drawings dated from last week. But the most terrifying part was the photos. Dozens of pictures of my house, but taken from inside. Photos of me sleeping in my bedroom, eating breakfast in my kitchen, watching TV in my living room. There were notebooks filled with detailed observations about my daily routine, what time I left for work, when I came home, what I ate for dinner. Someone had been living behind my basement wall, watching me, documenting my life for months. I called the police immediately. They searched the entire space and found a tunnel that connected to the storm drain system. Whoever had been living there could come and go without using the main entrance to my house. The family photos on the wall were of the home's previous owners, the family who had sold me the house. But according to public records, that family had moved to Florida 3 years ago. The police contacted them, and they confirmed they'd moved and had no idea who might be living in their old house. But here's what still haunts me. The detective told me that based on the evidence in that room, someone had been living there since before I bought the house. They'd been there when I did the home inspection, when I moved in, through all those nights when I thought I was alone. The voices I heard weren't coming from behind the wall. I found a small hole drilled through the ceiling of their hidden room, leading directly into my living room. They'd been listening to me, learning my routine, my voice, my habits, and sometimes, late at night, they'd have conversations mimicking the life they'd been watching me live. The police never found who was living there, but they did find something else in that room. A calendar with dates marked for the next 6 months. They'd been planning something. The last entry, scheduled for next week, just said replacement day. I moved out that night, but sometimes I wonder if they've found where I live now. Sometimes, late at night, I hear familiar voices having quiet conversations just beyond where I can see them,